So today we have verses 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 lined up. Let us start with verse number 11. I will chant. सर्वद्वारेषु देहेऽस्मिन् प्रकाश उपजायते ज्ञानं यदा तदा वेद्याः वेवेत्रं सत्त्वमेतयो. So this verse translates to, when the light of wisdom streams forth through all the gates in this body, then it may be known that sattva indeed is prominent. So, okay, before we start with the translation, today we are covering 5 verses. The first 3 are giving the characteristics or the symptoms of each of the gunas. So, we are starting with the sattva, verse number 11. Which translates to, when the light of wisdom streams forth through all the gates in this body, then it may be known that sattva indeed is prominent or predominant. Okay, let's do the translation. Sarv dwareshu. Sarv is all, dwar is gate. So sarv dwareshu becomes in all gates or through all gates. Deh is body, dehe becomes in body. Asmin, this, in this, prakash is light. Upjayate, streams forth. Jnanam is wisdom. Yada, when. Tada, then. Vidyat, know, or it should be known. Vivriddham. So Vivriddham will keep occurring in all the 3 verses. It means predominant or is the most apparent. So predominant. Sattva is the gun sattva. Iti das. Uta is certainly. So the verse translates to, when the light of wisdom streams forth through all gates in the body, then it may be known that sattva indeed is predominant. Let's chant it together.
सर्वद्वारेषु देहेऽस्मिन्
प्रकाश उपजायते ज्ञानं यदा तदा वेद्याः विवृतं सत्त्वमेत्ययो. So as I just mentioned, this set of 3 verses are explaining or are helping us analyze our mood and also the mood of the person that we are interacting with. Or the verses are going to tell us the symptoms of sattva, rajas, and tamas, which will caution us as to what mode we are functioning in. So the moment we see ourselves slipping into tamas, we should withdraw, Verse number 11 specifically is talking about the symptoms of sattva or the marks of sattva. So Lord Krishna says that when we see knowledge radiating from a person or from ourselves, we should know that we are in the presence of a highly sattvic person, or we are in a highly sattvic mood. That means sattva is predominant. And the verse says that the light of wisdom shines forth from an individual through all the gates of the body, right? And then sattva is predominant. So you may recollect, we had done this in chapter 5. In our scriptures, the body is referred to as a city, a pur. And verse number 13 of chapter 5 had talked about Nav Dware Pure Dehi, or the city with 9 gates. At that point of time, we had discussed. In this, so there the 9 gates refer to the 2 eyes, nostrils, ears, mouth, genitals, and anus, right? In this verse, when we are talking about all the gates of the body, we are actually focusing on all the sense organs and all the organs of action, which is actually the 9 gates that I just mentioned. So a sattvic person radiates brightness, which is knowledge actually, or which is the wisdom that he has acquired, or of pure consciousness through all these openings or these apertures. This happens because in that mood, we are using all our faculties. That means the karmindriya, the five organs of action, speech, movement, grasp, evacuation, and reproduction to act for God. And their gyanindriya, our gyanindriyas, the five organs of perception, hearing, feeling, seeing, touching, and tasting and smelling. And all these are focused to contemplate on God. So a sattvic person blazes forth knowledge, clarity of thought, calmness, and peace. Now, specifically, we look at the qualities when we are in a sattvic mood. What happens? Our thoughts are crystal clear. There are no doubts. Our emotions are chaste, absolutely pure. Our intellect is sharp. Our awareness is keen. And our action is exemplary. And very often we function at this level, and that moment passes and we achieve some great feat or we do something exceptional. And afterwards, we ourselves wonder, what happened to me? How come I was scintillating that day? What happened? I was able to achieve so much and with such little effort. So we ourselves wonder what had happened was at that point of time, all these attributes were with me simultaneously. Typical example is a scientist at the at the threshold of a momentous discovery is in a pure sattvic mood. So a sattvic person is an embodiment of perfection, and we have read in the previous set of verses that such a person is attached to happiness and knowledge, and he looks at objects on beings of the world in the light of knowledge and wisdom. That means what? That he starts seeing all people the same Brahman functioning through all the people. So he understands that we all have the same essence, which is equally present in all of us. So he does not see the various names and forms. He sees oneness across the board, or he believes in the oneness principle. And because of this, he is able to function in the spirit of service and sacrifice without having to do too much of thought process on this. So he is capable of intense work without any agitation and fatigue. Now, these two qualities are in sharp contrast to a Rajasic person. Rajasic person also acts, but because of the selfish desires, he is prone to agitation and mental disturbance. And of course, a tamasic person is lazy who is not even prone to action. Then the oneness principle is not there in the Rajasic person. And we will discuss it when we come to the next verse. So a sattvic person believes in the oneness principle, and the sattvic person does not compromise on the noblest qualities. We must appreciate that even the slight traces of rajas, which is agitation of mind, or tamas, laziness, mar the purity of sattva. So when we have cleansed our personality of all rajas and tamas, sattva radiates. Therefore, even when we, at times when we scintillate, at that point of time, there is no rajas or tamas in us. That's why pure sattva emanates at that particular point of time. Also, it would be, you may remember, recollect that verse 6 of this chapter had referred to sattva as prakash kam, or luminous or radiant, and anamayam, healthy, without any obstruction or disturbance. So a sattvic person is just short of self-realization, And functioning in that mode, he is able to navigate the world with all its mundane activity, focusing on the ultimate goal. And once the slight traces of rajas and tamas are also removed, the person now in pure sattva is ready to move towards the final goal, which is moksha. So that was verse number 12. Let's move on to verse number, sorry, that was verse 11. Now let's move on to verse number 12. I will chant. लोभा प्रवृत्तिरारम्भः कर्मणामशमस्पृह रजस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे भरतर्षभा. So the verse translates to greed, activity, undertaking of actions or enterprises, restlessness, longing. These arise when rajas predominates, O Bhartarshabha. So let's take this up word by word. Lobh is greed, pravriti is activity, arambh is commencing, so starting an undertaking. Karmanam is karm is work, so karmanam becomes of works of. Asham is unrest. Sham is rest. Asham is the opposite, unrest. Spriha is longing. Rajasi. In Rajas, etani, these, jayante, arise. Vivridhe in predominance. Bhartarshava is a name for Arjun. That is how Krishna is referring to him in this verse. So the verse translates to greed, activity, undertaking of actions, restlessness, longing. These arise when rajas predominates, O Bhartarshabha. So let's chant it together. Lobha
Arambha
pravritirarambha karmanamashamaha spraha rajasyetani jayante
Vividhe
Vitte Bhartarshabha. So the verse presents the symptoms of rajas. And most of us, actually, I think 80 to 90% of us are mostly functioning in the rajasic mode. So 80% of the time we are in rajas. So we have all noticed them somehow, we have not analyzed and translated that data to information, right? So it's not making sense to us. And also, we tend to think that, I know we should be moving on the spiritual path, but what is the hurry? At present, I have so many responsibilities to discharge, so many commitments. I have my family, my work, and my home. They are very important. So I will take up spirituality when the correct time happens. We don't realize that all this action is actually pushing us down further and further into the rabbit hole, as Alice would have said. We are entangled in the web or caught in the net. Now, these are also what the web, the net is what our communication systems are using. Okay, so that no pun intended here. So we are entering into a never ending cycle of acquiring and maintaining. Not entering, we have entered and we are finding it difficult to withdraw actually. Lord Krishna in this verse says that lobh or greed, pravriti or activity, aram karmanam or undertaking of work or enterprises, asham, restlessness, spriha, longing for worldly enjoyments are the qualities of a rajasic person. So now these qualities, lo, pravriti, aram, karmanam, asham, spriha, they are all interconnected and they arise from greed. Greed means what? Greed means something which you can never exhaust. It was called Trishna when we were just recapping the verses. So, greed refers to an inexhaustible desire where we want always a little more power, a little more money, little more name. It never ends. And I think there are many quotes you can search, but the one that is most relevant in our context is Mahatma Gandhi's, which is that the world has enough for everyone's need, but it does not have enough for everyone's greed, which actually is inspired from our famous verse of Ishavasya Upanishad, verse number 1, that you enjoy all that is bestowed upon you. But please remember that it is not yours. Don't have a grid drishti on this, whatever is coming your way. It's not your, it's not yours. So the word greed has actually come from that grid that we had covered in the Ishupanishad. Now, how does the cycle work? Let's just analyze. Lobh, lalach. Greed makes us want more. That is, of course, there. So we start acting towards that want. So it makes us active, which leads to the next characteristic, which is pravriti. So we start working towards that, and we will start enterprises. We are always planning, scheming, I will do this next. At the same time, we could be planning n number of things. Now, all these egocentric, desire ridden undertakings, they are for selfish gains. So we come under the I, me, mine category. We want name, fame, wealth. I think most of us are besotted with this. All this results in asham, mental agitation and unrest, and spriha, longing for things that we have not yet accomplished. So the Olympics are going on, and more than the shooters, it's we who want them to get the gold. You see, we have not got a gold medal so far. So it's a longing for something that we have not got, objects that we have not acquired, profits that we have not earned. So our mental quietude is completely shattered. And because we are not mentally at peace, we are actually also unable to enjoy the fruits of what are there in front of us. So, if the mango is cut and it's a nice, the cherry mango which is cut and put out in front of me, because I'm thinking of where I have to rush immediately after my lunch, I'm not even savoring what is there in front of me. This happens to most of us. So in this state, the rajas is predominating over sattva and tamas. And the consequence of unchecked desires, as the verse says, they make us greedy and lead us to feverish activity. Now, the word feverish is important because you may recollect that when we did the Karma Yoga chapter, verse 30 suggested that Krishna had told Arjun that he should work in the fashion of Vigat Jwar. Jwar is fever and Vigat is without or free. So Vigat Jwar meant free from mental fever. So a Rajasic person actually functions with feverish activity. And we are just, in frenzy over our duties and responsibilities, my duty towards my family, my duty towards my organization. Fine, they're there. But, we don't have to become so besotted by them. And because of this overwhelmance of our duties and responsibilities, we start working with, feverish activity. And consequently, we are constantly undertaking works. Also, this results in doership, that I did this and I served the food, or I met the deadline, so on and so forth. And we become fruit oriented, which as far back as chapter 2 we were told that you should act in the spirit of not expecting the fruit of the action. So we become fruit oriented. We are worried that whether I will reach the meeting in time or not, whether this will happen or not, because we are longing for fulfillment of desires. All this is leading to mental agitation because of unfulfillment desires, and anxiety for more and more gains. So the Rajasic person lives in I am the one. That means the entire world is there to serve me, which is in direct contrast to the Sattvic person's oneness principle. And of course, Arjun is being referred to as Bhartarshava, which is the finest specimen of the Bharat race. And a bull is an example of great sacrifice because a bull works hard and eats only grass and fodder. So, maximum work at minimum expenses. And so, Arjun was known for his selfless actions and work. Let's move on to verse number 30. अप्रकाशो प्रवृत्तिश्च प्रमादो मोह एव च तमस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृद्धे कुरु नन्दन. So this verse translates to darkness, inertness, heedlessness, and also delusion. These arise when tamas predominates, O Kurunandana. So let's take this up word by word. Aprakash, prakash is light, aprakash becomes darkness or without light. Apravriti, pravriti we just read in the previous verse, talked of action. Apravriti becomes without action or inert. Cha and pramad is one who is heedless, always given to recreation, not thinking. Just give me a moment. Can you mute yourself? Someone is talking on the phone.
Yeah, Jyoti is talking.
Yeah, I've muted her. Okay. So, pramad means when you are always in an entertaining, you are heedless actually, you're just in recreation. And sorry, where was I? What was the last word that I did? Okay. Pramad is heedlessness. Moh is delusion. When you are uh, deluded, that means your intellect is not assisting you. Ev, also cha and tamasi in tamas. Etani is these. Jayante, arise. Vivridhe, in predominance. Kurunandan is O Kurunandana, name for Arjun, descendant of the great Kurus. So the verse translates to darkness, inertness, heedlessness, and also delusion. These arise when tamas predominates, O Kurunandana. So let's chant it together. अप्रकाशो प्रवृत्तिश्च प्रमादो मोह एव च तमस्येतानि जायन्ते विवृते कुरु नन्दन. So now we come to the symptoms of tamas. And I mean, Lord Krishna is saying that dullness, inertia, heedlessness, and delusion are the qualities of a tamasic person. In such people, tamas is predominating over sattva and rajas. So basically, what the tamasic person is, or when we are in the tamasic mood, how we function, a tamasic person is dull. Nothing registers. So you tell your help, do this, look at you like with a blank face and say, oh, okay. And then again you'll say, the things don't register. Then they are procrastinating. So once understood, then I'll do it tomorrow. Definitely, I'll do it tomorrow. And it's that eternal tomorrow, which never arrives. So nothing is done today. Everything is kept for tomorrow. So they have a tendency to avoid and escape all responsibilities, act without thinking, which results in heedlessness, and actually are quite incompetent. So when you look around you at times, you say, how can a person be like this? So they are quite incompetent in most of the things that they do. Also, they lack enthusiasm. They are always, making a face or unhappy. They have no enthusiasm to achieve or do anything in the world. Then they are unable to discriminate because their intellect does not function, so they cannot discriminate with what is right and what is wrong. So they arrive at wrong conclusions or wrong decisions. And all this leads to delusion. So we must be careful when any of these symptoms or a combination of them are appearing in us. That means tamas is taking over in us, or tamas is starting to predominate, and we should be careful. A tamasic person miscalculates the world, misinterprets his or her own capability, and also makes mistake in worldly relationships and is completely irresponsible. And such people, of course, do not understand that that same Brahman is within all of us, so that is a forego. I mean, that is something that they don't even understand. And steeped in inertia, such a person has no mission in life. Now, Krishna is addressing Arjun as Kuru Nandana, or the son of the Kurus, an eminent family of that time, to motivate him and act as the Kurus, the great Kurus would have functioned. Now, we come to the end of this set of 3 verses. The construct of these verses is very important. See, verse number 11, I'm not talking now of the characteristics, I'm talking about this. Verse number 11 said that light of wisdom streams forth when sattva is predominant. Verse 12 said greed, activity, etc. arise when rajas is predominant. And verse number 13 said that dullness, inertia, etc. arise, upjayate, when tamas is predominant. So what it means is that when we talk of the light of wisdom streaming forth, it implies that it is not a product of anything. It is there within all of us. That same Brahman is there within all of us. The point is that we have covered it with rajas and tamas. That is what is obscuring it. The wise, the sattvic people, or the jnani, actually, when we had done the earlier chapters, understand this ever existence of the sattvic quality and its purity. So the construct of the 3 verses, I thought I would highlight. Now let's move on to verse number 14 and 15. Actually, again, they form a set. And after covering the symptoms of the 3 gunas, these 2 verses are actually talking of the consequences of what happens with these 3 gunas. So verse number 14. यदा सत्त्वे प्रवृद्धे तु प्रलयं याति देहभृत् तदोत्तं वेद्यां लोकान् अमलं प्रापद्यते. I'll chant it again. यदा सत्त्वे प्रवृद्धे तु प्रलयं याति देहभृत् तदोत्तं वेदां लोकान् अमलं प्रतिपद्यते. So the verse translates to, when the embodied meets death in the predominance of sattva, then he attains the spotless worlds of the knowers of the Supreme. So let's take this up word by word. Yada, when, sattve, sattva, so sattve becomes in sattva, pravriddhe is in predominance, tu indeed, pralayam is pralay, the death of the embodied, yati means deha bhrat. So Deha is body, Brat is one who's taken. So Deha Brat becomes the embodied living being. Tada then Uttam Vidam. So Uttam is the best. Vidam is Vidya is knowledge. So Uttam Vidam becomes the knowers of that supreme knowledge. Lokan. Lok is world. So Lokan becomes two worlds. So plural worlds. Amalan is spotless, clean. Mal is dirt, filth. Amal becomes spotless, clean. Pratipadyate attains. So the verse translates to when the embodied meets death in the predominance of sattva, then he is implied. There are no gender things here. So the being attains the spotless worlds of the knowers of the Supreme. So let's chant it together. Yada satve pravriddhe tu pralayam yati dehabhra तदोत्तं वेद्यानलोकान् अमलान् प्रतिपद्यते. So basically, what is being presented before us is nothing but the law of karma. See, on death, when we discard our kshetra, which is the body, so those who have been cultivating sattva by predominating sattva over rajas and tamas will be born in an environment which is conducive for furthering the sattvic values, which are virtues, knowledge, attitude of service towards others. So uh, that is that is logical. So once you are in that mode, this is what you'll seek. See, this is when we leave a room or we leave a place, where we go next or where our mind goes next is dependent upon what is our immediate need. So when we leave a place of work, our office or a business or a workshop or whatever, where we go at the after completing the work there will depend upon our desires. Now, if I want to go home and meet my family, that is where I'll head. If I have, I'm seeking knowledge, maybe I have an evening class lined up for me, I will head there. Some of us may head towards pub or movies. I mean, so that's logical. So whatever value you have at that particular point, when you exit from one place, determines where you'll go next. So similarly, when we leave our physical body, which is nothing but a bundle of vasanas and desires, our next birth is determined by our most powerful vasanas at the time of departure. And this vasana, this powerful set of vasanas has been leading us through our various cycles of birth and death. So the verse 1 is definitely suggesting that when we die or on death, we will carry forth the gunas that we have acquired during our lifetime. And with sattvic vasanas predominant, we are propelled to spotless worlds or heavens, you may call it. So, you know, Amalan, I've already explained. Lokan is worlds. Now, worlds seems to imply that there may be repeated births even for a sattvic person before he or she is able to remove the traces of rajas and tamas from the personality. But the direct consequence of this is that a sattvic person is born into a learned family of pious people, scholars, persons well versed in knowledge, etc. So the sattvic person is actually attracting this environment, which is spiritually charged, because the person can continue on his or her spiritual journey and move towards the goal of self realization. This bit is not new. What is being said in this verse is not new. We had covered it in the Dhyan Yoga chapter number 6. And you may recollect, the verses 37, 38, and 39, Arjun had posed this question in front of Krishna, that what happens to a spiritual seeker whose efforts do not culminate in this lifetime? That means he is not able to reach moksha in this lifetime. So, what happens to the efforts that he has put in? Uh, do they go waste? What happens? This is very much the doubt that we all encounter. So, and Krishna had reassured him, and you may read verses 40, 41, 42, and 43, that those who follow the spiritual path assiduously do not lose anything, neither in this life nor in the next. So, implying that the spiritual efforts are not lost. In fact, this is the only knowledge that we carry forward, and they have a cumulative effect from birth to birth, from each embodiment that we take. So, if we think that goodness causes sorrow and grief, we have to take it out of our systems. Goodness, according to the law of the eternal laws, the law of cause and effect and the law of karma, goodness cannot lead to sorrow and grief. There was something in us. If I'm sorrowful today, or if I'm sad today, something must have happened. I may or may not be aware of what I did. So, our actions, our past actions, are determining our next birth. And the theory of incarnation, which is what we are discussing, follows the law of karma and the law of cause and effect. Unfulfilled desires are the cause of next birth, and the texture of vasanas, these gunas that are there, determine our next birth. And when a righteous person, at that point of time, Krishna had said that when a righteous person is reincarnated, either goes into a house of material wealth and mental peace, or he's born into the family of wise yogis, which are engaged in self-development, and they motivate the person further on the spiritual journey. This is a conducive environment that we are talking about here in this chapter, chapter 14, and in this verse. So, whatever traces of rajas and tamas that remain in such a person, they are also removed in this particular environment into which a sattvic person is born. We move to the last verse for the day, which is verse number 15. I will chant. Rajasi pralayam gatva karma sangeshu jayate tatha pralinastamasih मूढ़योनिषु jayate. Meeting death in Rajas, he is born among those attached to action, and dying in Tamas is born in the wombs of senseless. Let's take this up word by word. Rajasi, in Rajas, pralayam, to death, gatva, gone, having gone, karma sangishu. So karma is action, sangishu is attachment. So karma sangishu becomes among those attached to action. Jayate is born, tatha also, or and. Pralin, dying. Tamasi, in tamas. Mood yonishu. Mood is murk, senseless. Yoni is womb. So mood yonishu becomes in wombs of the senseless. Jayate is born. So the verse translates to meeting death in Rajas is born among those attached to action, and dying in Tamas is born in the wombs of the senseless. So let's chant it together. Rajasi pralayam gatva karma sangeshu jayate tatha pralinastamasi मूढ़योनिषु jayate. So the same eternal law applying, the law of reincarnation, which follows the law of karma and the law of cause and effect. When rajas is predominant at the time of death, one is born in an environment charged with action or in an action-oriented family. So those who permit themselves to be overcome by greed, all those characteristics, now, greed, action, undertaking of an enterprise, etc., etc., are born in families which are focused on intense material activity, very often the business class. So this person can, continue with acquisition. The person can continue with action and acquisition. And because they're extroverted people moving out into the world, they do not pursue the higher ideal of self realization. When tamas is predominant, one is born or reborn in the wombs of the senseless, mood yonishu. This is very, very important. The unintelligent, the ignorant, the inert. So, when tamas predominates, one is born into lower states of living, maybe of illiterates, drunk, and when there is still higher levels of tamas, we can actually go down the evolutionary ladder and be born into the lower species, which includes creatures which are other than humans. So the verse is actually indicating that human forms or human form is not reserved permanently. So once you have taken birth as a human being, but you behave like an animal, the next birth will definitely be that of an animal. So the human form is not reserved permanently for a soul. Those who do not put in good use of this jivan or this life are in terrible danger of moving down into the animal forms again. This is also mentioned in the verse 3 of Ishavasya Upanishad, where we talk about the uh, घोर अंधकार से भरी हुई है वो जगह जहां पे you will be when you do any action which hurts the soul of another being, you will go to those lok or those regions which are filled with घोर अंधकार, घोर tamas. So Ish Upanishad is also saying the same thing. So we must remember that all paths are open for us at all times. We can go up, we can stagnate, or we can go down. Therefore, we must be very, very careful as to what we do with our gunas or how we use it. And with that, we will conclude today's session.